This show is so unapologetically Eminence and Shadow. I mean, the spice, the violence, and just the way they turn tropes on their heads will never fail to make me entertained. And I mean, they know what they're doing with some of these shots. Some of these shots I can't even get away with on YouTube. Even though technically things are all covered, I mean, they knew what they were doing. And I think one of my favorite jokes has to be just whenever this girl loses her padding. There's literally a moment in this episode where, because like the slimes that they control just all start kind of melting, and you just see like these two blobs just hit the ground and she quickly collects them. Just so little moments in this show, man. But I have to say, like, all throughout watching this week's episode of Shadow, I was like, why is he keeping his eye closed? Because moment one, all the way to the end, up until an eye actually opens, he was just walking around with one eye closed. I was second guessing myself. I was like, did I miss something in the previous episode? Like, did he get wounded or something? Or is this all about trying to appear cool? I mean, I've seen it before where the character doesn't open their eyes until there's a worthy opponent or some stupid nonsense like that. But I mean, there's a little moment prior to his eye opening and you see the glowing kind of tinge effect, is you see it kind of radiate on his hand at one point. So it seems like he was building a power of some sort. At least that's my interpretation of it. Obviously, next episode will deliver the answer for sure, because everyone's obviously underestimating him because he's getting tossed around the room by the hero, and I mean, it doesn't look good from anyone's points of view, but the man does have his courage, I'll give him that. I expect some sort of shadow transformation in some way, or maybe something like that, but it'll be fun nonetheless. But out of the past few episodes, I'd give the edge to this one. I really think they delivered on the entertainment factor, the spice factor, and just, honestly, more intriguing concepts in general. Of course, I do have a full live reaction to today's episode available on the Patreon, so consider supporting if you want to see that. But let's talk about this one. Episode 13. I mean, yeah, there's been some rumors and rumblings that maybe we'll be getting more than 20 episodes. Obviously, I don't know anything other than just said rumors, but I mean, the material's there, I think the passion from the fandom is there, and hopefully we will get more than just the 20 at some point, but what I've seen over now 13 episodes, in the way they dissected, they turned these tropes and cliches on its head, I mean, look at the moment when she's trying to give up herself, right? Because she's like, I don't want to see you hurt anymore. I mean, it's just such a cliche performance. Her VA does such an extremely solid job and making it feel like that typical damsel in distress who's like, please don't do it anymore, I'll give up myself, I don't want to see you hurt anymore. But because we're following Sid, we can never take it as serious as maybe some of these characters are trying to make it, because we know damn well if there's a cliche, similar to how Delta in this episode took a giant sword that was the size of a mountain and slammed it on the multiple clones of this fat old dude, that's what our boy Sid does to any cliche that pops up in his series, because he is the Eminence in Shadow, and cliches will always get smashed into smithereens. And I just like the fact that it was just such an interesting episode, because there's so many ideas you've seen in so many different shows. If you've seen at least a dozen shows in this style of anime, you can just see how they're having fun almost taking the piss on them, but turning them into something different, but also fleshing things out in ways that I wish more anime would. One of the biggest is honestly Delta herself. There's so many times you look at anime and you see beast-humanoid mixtures of a character design. And for her, she looks like, well, she's partly animal and partly human. But I think in general, when it comes to like a fighting scene, if you were to really have a humanoid beast-like character, they should be more animalistic when they're fighting. And the change from adorable cinnamon roll, as seen by her exit when, she's getting scolded, to violent menace, I think they do such a good job at making it feel like a character design's just not there to pander to a fetish or something, but rather, they use it in a way that actually feels realistic if this was a real fight scene with someone who does appear half animal and half human. I mean, how would an animal actually fight? They'd be running on all fours and slicing and dicing, and they would feel ferocious, and that's exactly how she felt. And then in the moments where she feels more human, as in the case of a sword or some sort of object that she's fighting in her hands, they go the extra mile to make it the size of a mountain as she clobbers them. And it's just like, I like the fact that they're going that extra mile, and any show that can take something I've seen hundreds of times, or at the very least dozens of times, but moments like these at least hundreds of times, and turn them into being more fleshed out and thought out than just, oh, we're gonna make it so she's barely wearing anything because she's a beast girl, and kind of does a little run like an animal. No, they're like, she is a wild animal in these moments, and they delivered on that carnage, and it was bloody, it was gruesome, it was spicy, it was basically what you expect from the Eminence and Shadow, and that's not a bad thing. But I really liked how they're going about like this almost dream environment, because in the prior episode, we saw the whole slap scene and her waking up, and then they transition to the next area, right? In this one, we see her in there's a sea of corpses, right? It was a battlefield, it was bloody. My thought process is she might have been responsible for all those deaths, hard to say, but there's a bunch of zombies coming every which direction, and the way they get through that one is actually by killing her in this moment, right? Basically shattering and breaking free. I thought the whole concept of her picking up the sword initially was because, well, there was clearly going to be some people that would jump at her. No, she was completely blindsided by that. It's almost like a virus trying to get rid of the people invading on these areas, and it was really cool to see how Sid just kind of like, with one eye open the entire episode, just casually kept you hook, line, and sinker going from point A to point B all the way to the finish line, and by the end of the episode you just say, what has this man been building into this entire time? Of course he wants to be the Eminence and Shadow. He's both the background character for so many, the secret warrior in the shadows who takes care of these vigilantes in the distance, as his people are literally uncovering occultist activities because of his help without even realizing it. Like, the show just does so much in such a short amount of time, and by the time an episode wraps up, you wish you had the next 5 minimum, if not the next 12 if you could. The show is without a doubt going to be one of the best binges I think I can recall in some time, because this show is definitely getting rewatched when it does eventually wrap up, probably for anticipation of the next batch of episodes or whatever, just because I think there's some nice little clues as well throughout the journey in terms of how he performs his little moments in these shows. Like, you can sometimes see him coming a mile away, but then other times you see the way he goes about his background character deaths, or, I mean, how many times has he now been stabbed through the chest, or it looks like he should be dead at a moment's notice. I love what they did visually with the red, black and white, almost red glow that they did for, you see the shock, you see the smile, you see the sword going through him, and it was just a really nice directing choice in general, and I can't help but love the show, man. I love the characters in general, I love the comedy, it just is absolutely hilarious, because some of the comedy is completely fresh and exciting, and then the half of the other bits of comedy is literally them just taking the piss on tropes and cliches and turning them into something far more interesting. But the fact that when it does get serious with the cultist plotline or these characters' lives, it's nice to see what they're able to do, and I'd say honestly the only disappointing aspect about this episode is initially when the hero gets summoned. I truly thought, because, you know, this fat bastard, he seems like he's the type of person who got to where he is not because of skill, but just because he was lucky, so I was kind of hoping maybe she would just cut off his head in that moment, but you know what, it's okay, because then in return we ended up getting the whole Sid scene, so it all works out in the end, but I was kind of hoping that maybe it would just immediately end that scene in that way, but the fact that they can casually retreat and say, unless you want to come chase us, and we'll be back when we feel like it. I just thought that was awesome. But either way, I leave another episode with a grin on my face. Like I said, over the past few episodes, I give the edge to this one, but I don't think there's been a bad episode whatsoever. But thoughts and feelings yourself down below. What do you think is going to happen in next episode? Do let me know. Leave a like if you enjoyed, and subscribe if you're new around here. Now, of course, there is that full live reaction available on the Patreon, and while you're there, you can get a video shout out like a handful of people are about to get here. So we got Bryce Jackson, Reagan Aratakas Burner, we have Toasted Toad, Hermes Hemp, and Dylan Miles. So I appreciate the support, everyone. Please take care and have a good one.